There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being the capable one, the responsible one, the person everyone depends on, while quietly breaking promises to yourself. You show up for everyone else, you manage crisis, your system keeps running. But when it comes to caring for your own body, your own rest, your own needs, something stops you. And the weight of that gap between who you are for others and who you are for yourself becomes its own kind of survival mode. And today we are talking about what actually takes up to rebuild that sort of self trust when life has taught you to put yourself last, no matter how small, unglamorous ways it has expressed itself in. Welcome to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I am Sreemedha, and this is where we have honest conversations about mental health, habits, and the everyday work of becoming someone you can depend on. And joining me today is Anjelis Oliveira. Angelis, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me today.
And listeners, Angelis is the founder of Rising Stars Wellness, and she's a registered nurse, wellness coach, and someone who has navigated major health challenges after her surgeries and a stroke at 39, and ultimately a transformation which was built largely on her willpower. And uh, she learned how not to abandon herself. And I'm looking forward to talking to her today.
Thank you so much
Angelis,
for yes.
yeah, please.
Thank you so much for your time today and for the warm introduction. So yes, I my name's Anjelis, founder of Rising Star Wellness. I've been a nurse though for 20 years. So always been in the space of caring for others. In addition to that, I was a young mom, a teenage mom with two young boys at the age of 20, which really shifted the my time and focus from me and learning how to take care of myself to taking care of them. So it's always been a pattern for me of putting other people before me. And for a long time, that is what drove my beliefs and my patterns is to overachieve and move forward despite myself. In To your point, at age 39, I had a stroke. I was overweight, overworked, did not have any, and did not have the consistent habit of caring for myself. And that was in 2022 had a turning point. I had gone through different seasons of my life with extreme weight loss, lap band, gastric sleeve, and even then, and in 2022, I was still 278 pounds. And if it wasn't until my son was diagnosed with a brain tumor, had it removed, that I was shocked into, hey, I need to take care of myself to take care of him. So even then, it wasn't about me, it was about him. But at the same time, I, about a month before, had enrolled in a wellness coaching certification, which was interesting because I had my health challenges. I was definitely not prioritizing myself and not in a healthy state. So I felt a little bit like an imposter. Like, how am I going to tell people about their wellness when I'm not taking care of myself? However, being a nurse for so long, I figured I can use my knowledge to help other people. But little did I know that I was in for the transformation of my life. I, sitting in the hospital bed with my son, in that hospital room, I made a decision that I needed to show up in a different way at that time for him and started the process. Through the process, I started with the work on my mindset, on my identity, really being identifying my disempowering beliefs, reframing them for the beliefs of my version 2.0 that I was becoming, and really taking responsibility for my current state. And the beautiful thing about responsibility is the ability to respond and the ability to respond differently. So, although my journey started from being in survival mode to wanting to show up differently to take care of my son at that time, it transformed into love yourself to health and progress, not perfection, which is where Rising Star Wellness was born.
That is such a inspiring journey. And Angelus, you have been so strong to, smile through it all, I would say. And you mentioned that it had to do a lot with uh, your self trust, rebuilding your self trust and working on yourself, your willpower. So, how did it look like in practice for you when you were, uh, breaking promises that usually you have been catering to people for so long that you have kept yourself neglected for a long period of time. So, how did it look like when you finally started showing up for yourself?
Yeah, to your point, I mean, I had a life of in certain areas of my life, I was quite successful. I had a career, had advanced degrees. So externally, it looked like I was thriving. However, when it came to caring for me, I would put myself last and I would break promises to myself. And then every time the cycle would start where you start with a wellness or you start on a diet or you start on a journey and you fall off and it takes weeks or months to come back, and then it's a cycle, and in that cycle you build the identity that you don't follow through with yourself. So what changed for me and that what I learned and I did differently is that I didn't focus on this dramatic overhaul. It was really based on small, sustainable changes, which at times we don't see the value of, well, what does it matter if I walk 10 minutes? That's not going to really make an impact long term. But what we're doing is that we are showing ourselves and building the identity that we are the type of person that follows through. And that was the difference. And one of the tools that I used and I still use today is setting a minimum daily action. And what does that mean? That means that when life goes awry, when you have a busy day, when you don't get enough sleep, whatever the situation is, because life is going to continue to happen and not go as planned. So, a minimum daily action provides you with a plan of the minimum action that you will take that demonstrates that you are showing up for yourself. For me at one time, that was just putting on my shoes and setting out my gym clothes that night before. Then there was a time that it was actually driving to the gym and getting there. Then there was a time of, you know what? I'm going to go into the gym and 5 minutes. I'm going to be there for 5 minutes. And it's not that you can't do more. You can always do more. But the minimum, the moment that you meet it, you have shown up for yourself, you have kept the promises to yourself, and that compounds over time and you build your self trust. And what that has done for me is provided the confidence that I know that no matter what, I become the type of person that I will figure it out. I will show up for myself and I will work through it. I may not know how, and that can be scary at times because we want to have that safety net that we know how everything's going to pan out. But then what happens is that we want to focus on so much at once that we become overwhelmed. So I've also learned on one step at a time. Sometimes that's one day at a time. Sometimes transparently is 1 minute at a time. But you take it one step at a time and you continue the momentum and you are intentional about showing up.
Absolutely, and that's just the whole idea, to take one step at a time. And as you mentioned repeatedly, that it's not about overhauling everything; it's about keep showing up even when it gets difficult. But Angelus, I would exactly bring this in because most people consider these moments as reasons to stop. So, how do you tell them to keep going, to take that one small step at a time and sustain the sort of change, especially when it gets difficult?
Absolutely. And it starts with the foundation that you build. And one of the most important foundations is really determining your clear what. What is it exactly that you want? And most people focus on the outcome, right? I want to lose 50 pounds. Well, why do you want to lose 50 pounds? I want to lose 50 pounds because I want to feel confident in my skin. I want to lose 50 pounds because I want to wear an outfit. I want to lose 50 pounds because I want to be able to go skydiving, or I want to be able to go zip lining, or I want to be able to walk without getting short of breath, or I want to give myself the best shot to be around for those people that I love for as long as possible. And that very powerful why serves as an anchor that when life happens and things get difficult and your plans change, you remind yourself as to why you are in this journey. And something that helped, a tool, is to have anchors. What are anchors? Anchors are physical reminders of what you're working towards and why you're doing it. It can be a picture, it can be a picture of the zip line that you want to go to, or the vacation you want to take, or whatever it might be. I used to have on my phone a background, and it has changed and it has evolved over time. One of them was, I remember, it said, "Do it anyway," because sometimes we feel that we have to want to do something or have the drive to do something, but give yourself permission to show up anyway. Give yourself permission, even if it's not 100%. I remember that early on in my journey, I was at the gym. I chose to go to the gym as movement. You can choose whatever movement works for you because the best movement is the one that you do consistently. But for me, it was going to the gym and I was doing it, but the conversation, my inner conversation was like, I don't want to do this. I'm tired. Just our internal thoughts are so important. And I had a coaching call and she said something to me that was so profound. She said to me, you showed up, you did it anyway. Give yourself permission to show up, even if not at 100%. And that changed something within me because it gave me the space to do it if I was tired, to do it if I was stressed, to do it if I didn't want to, but I would show up anyway. So my anchor at that time was do it anyway. Then as my journey progressed, there was things that I was doing that made me uncomfortable. And in growth is discomfort. And my anchor then changed to do it afraid. So it's a beautiful thing when you are able to define your clear what, have a powerful why, and build anchors around it so that you can be have a physical reminder in your environment as to what you're working towards and understanding that it'll evolve over time.
Absolutely. And what you beautifully mentioned, how there will be no growth if there's no discomfort. I think that's something we need to keep in mind.
Absolutely. This is uncomfortable. I'm be honest with you, right? The version of myself 2 years ago would be extremely uncomfortable in doing something like putting myself out there in a podcast, or creating my own podcast, or putting my story on a website. And through understanding that there's growth in discomfort and that we have to break apart those beliefs and that identity that has held us, or not held us, that resulted in the person that we were, and understanding that we can change that by being intentional is the beautiful thing about responsibility. And understanding that nothing changes if nothing changes. So it's a beautiful opportunity when you have the ability to make yourself uncomfortable in a way that will promote your growth. So at times, transformation, and this is an analogy that really resonated with me. Do you know that for a seed to be the best expression of themselves, they need to break apart? And to from the outside, someone looking from the outside in, you can look at that as destruction. But really, it's breaking apart those shells and breaking apart those barriers so that you can be the best expression of yourself. Although it can be quite painful and uncomfortable in the process.
I totally love that analogy. And I think it's not about never struggling. It's about having the strong foundation that we can struggle and still come back to be ourselves.
Exactly. And that's where my program GOP-1 Lifestyle Reset comes in, because it was developed by myself, Rising Star Wellness, so we can stop starting over every Monday. How many times have we gone on a diet and we'll have one meal that was different than what we planned? And rather than having the mindset of, you know what, I enjoyed the meal, I had the meal, and having the ability to choose differently next time, we're like, well, you know what? It's Friday. I already had this meal. Everything has gone to array. I'll just start on Monday. And it's a perpetual cycle of starting over every Monday, when really we have the ability to reset on our next choice. And our next choice might be 10 minutes later, where you choose to hydrate, or you choose to get up from your desk and walk for 10 minutes, or you choose to go to bed and follow your bed routine, or you choose to, your next meal, stick to your plan. So instead of restarting, it's a reset. Things are going to go sometimes not as planned, and that is part of life. But having the ability to reset on your next choice is what continues the momentum. Because what happened to me and what's happened to a lot of people is that that one lunch turns into dinner, turns into the weekend, turns into the next week, and turns into a month. And before you know it, you are in the same place, if not worse, than you were 3 months later. That if you would have just stuck to it, you would have seen progress. Because life doesn't have a finish line. It's the infinite game that as long as you continue showing up, you will see progress.
I totally love this analogy again. Angelis, thank you so much for sharing your story with such honesty. And this was such an enriching conversation. And if any of our listeners want to learn more about your story, where do you suggest we find you?
Yes, absolutely. So, risingstarwellness.com is our website. We're also on Instagram, Angelis_RSW coach, and GOP-1 lifestyle support. And we're on Facebook at Rising Star Wellness on our Facebook page. We also have our podcast, Love Practice Progress, which is in YouTube and Spotify.
I would definitely recommend our listeners to please go have a look. I'm sure it will be of much help. And Angelis, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. And listeners, I hope that this conversation reminds you that you are not broken and you're not behind. You just need to take that one step. And as Angelis mentions, life has no finish line. So you just need to show up for yourself in ways maybe no one ever taught you. And that work might begin with those small steps. And it's the most important thing that you will ever do for yourself. So take care of your mind, take care of your health, and I'll see you next time.